right, thanks. Thanks for bearing through our technical difficulties. We're going to get started. So we have Joe Fleming coming down from our great northern brother, land of the Canuck, the Canadians. And I'll start by telling a real quick story. Everyone knows I'm a storyteller, not too much of it. But it was a year ago we did our first MFA trip to New York, so we could get out of the valley and go up and see some art. Walking through Chelsea with some of the grads, Leanne Parrish and I a bunch of us walked into the Mike Weiss Gallery. And there's a great show on, it's really exciting, but both me and Leanne were like, look at that painting behind the desk. What is that? What is that? And we got really excited. Leanne had enough gumption to say, can we go look at that painting? And Mike was just like, yeah, sure, go on. We took a bunch of photographs, and we just really enjoyed it. It made us more so than the entire show. And so came back, and here we are inviting some new artists down. I thought, let's bring the guy who made the painting down to us this time. We'll shake hands and have stories. And so that led us to this moment. So Joe went to Sheridan University. He shows primarily in Toronto at the General Hardware Contemporary, the Taksu Gallery in Singapore, and the Mike Weiss Gallery in New York. Collections of his work are held in Singapore, Malaysia, and Canada. He shows mainly in that kind of triad relationship. His studio tech went to Monash University, which is kind of weird in a way. And so anyway, it's my great pleasure to have him come down. He's a guy that works in film, works in painting, also an educator. And so give him a round of applause to welcome him to the podium.
That's okay. Amazing. Well, thank you all for having me here today. Thanks to Morgan and Martha, and thanks to the university and all of the student body. They're going to sit through this agonizing little slideshow. I like to keep talks open and free flowing, so if you have any questions that are somewhat pertinent, you can shout it out. But I guess no further ado, we'll just start. This is the way we dress in Toronto. Typical, this was in July, August kind of time. It's my favorite beach. We're swimming there every day. I like to make fun because I think we live in Anglers, but we start in Anglers, then we get ahead of us. So there's a lot of different things here. I try to make it a little glimpse of, let's show some of the work. This is some of the dimensional work that I don't think was there when you were there, Morgan, this piece in particular. This was shown at Mike Weiss. Typically the works are 2D. This is from that same show, Sucker Punch. So this is on polycarbonate. But I'm going to show you a bit of work. I'm going to show you a bit of my life. I'm going to show you some of the people that I hang with. I'm going to show you some sculpture because it's a sculpture-based project. This whole talk. Morgan's got the sculpture thing going on. And some good friends of mine I really enjoy their work. I would call them sculptors. Let's start with a couple pieces so you know what I do. Again, these are polycarbonate plexiglass. It's a tougher version of plexiglass that I work on, with aluminum substrate. So I don't know how apparent it is in a slide, but there's a lot of the surface you can see right through the wall. So the image doesn't really end at the surface; it continues to the wall. And the wall becomes part of it. What I was playing with. My dog Harley. My little friend car that I picked up years ago in the back of the studio in Toronto. But to really start the tale of my life, I went to school for illustration, and I did it for years. This was for the Toronto International Film Festival. It was the poster, it was hoarding, it was bus shelters, it was Starbucks cups, it was watches, it was everything, and I was not paid much of anything. But there's a dimensional quality to this period of my life as an illustrator. This is loud enough, can anybody hear? I do slur a lot, so try to understand what I'm saying. And there was metal, there was nails, there was screws, there was irregular shape. That was kind of the thing that I did as an illustrator. That's what gave me an edge. And I did really well as an illustrator. I'm not going to show you any more images in this one. I did it for about 8 years. And I hated it. I had agents in New York, LA, London, everywhere. And I did New York Times cover as Business Week. I did fun projects like this. This was a really fun project. But I hated doing it. I didn't like being a pair of hands for somebody. So I moved to Santa Fe to find myself, the proverbial, get out of Dodge and see what you're worth kind of thing. And decided I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be a gallery artist. So I put the boots to that. But I always had this sculptural kind of pull. I look back and I think back. This talks are individual. Every talk I've done, I'll individualize it for whatever audience I'm going to or wherever the location is. It made me think though that I did have a real, throughout my, to this day, the last 30 years of working, there's been a sculptural quality or like something's drawing me to this thing. The illustrations were dimensional. A lot of the works now are dimensional. So it was interesting that I got the call from Oregon in the first place. But material and the next slide, drawing and the basic things kind of, I think I kind of try to pull all together. But I also try to take a surface and make it mine and try to individualize anything I work on. Everything's been done. We talked about this earlier in the morning, right? If you're thinking something, chances are somebody else is thinking of it in that collective kind of world that we live in. But I think that our goal is to just put our stamp on something and make it ours and make it individual. At least that's the way I think. And drawing to me is a big part, even though I don't really draw. I mean, I found this little drawing that I did a few years back, and I used to do silly little drawings like this, and I enjoy it. But drawing to me is more like this. I mean, this is a big sculpture. I think I have a slide of it that's coming up, but I'm drawing all the time. I'm drawing on the wall. I'm just like when I was a kid, I'm kind of reinterpreting and using it. But they're not formalized drawing. But I think drawing is a real big. It's the root. No matter what medium we look at, we draw. We think we have to scribble it or whatever way we do it. You invest a lot of time in your drawing or not. I think it's the basis of it. And power tools. So drawing and power tools are really important to me. I use the grinder, that's my best friend, on the plexiglass, and just rip and tear it and destroy it and put it back together. But materials like polycarbonate, enamel, all the things that are listed here, the spray foam, those have become my best friends, and I think that, again, for me anyways, taking things that are unlikely and bringing them to a different, into a different light, into a different milieu is, I think is maybe my strength, if I have any strengths. Studio shots, I try to keep it clean, always. Any questions so far? Is anybody bored? I could refer to my notes, I guess, but that's. I think that the whole thing about that I have written down about the dropping out of the illustration world, I think is very important. I think it's important to know your calling or what you really want to do and stick with it or go with it. I mean, we only live once, I think. Others think that we live more, but I think we just have one chance here. So I think that, I've never been one to just go for the dollar. I like money a lot, but I think that we have to push our dreams and follow them. So when I was in Santa Fe, I never met Florence Pierce. She's not around with us anymore, but I was influenced by this woman's work. she poured resins and she used all the stuff you shouldn't use, and probably that's why she's not with us anymore. But I love the translucency in her work. That's really what started me. That's why these slides are in here. Is that I had not yet worked on plexiglass when I was introduced to her work, and this thing of the light going through and the light bouncing back really stuck with me. I don't know if anybody's heard of her. I don't think she's a real household name or anything, but she was quite popular in Santa Fe back in the day. But it just, I mean, again, these slides don't do it any justice, but it's beautiful work. There'd be metal on the back and then these poured resins, and just the play of light and the sheen was quite beautiful. So that was a big influence. I think influence and inspiration is probably the key words on the day for my talk. Inspiration, I think, is, as an artist, if you don't find inspiration, then you might as well take that job. I mean, it's, you're going to pay the money, or take that illustration job, because I think inspiration is where it's at. That's what leads me with this slide, which is my daughter. I have 2 children, and they've become the big push, for me. They inspire me every second. That's Mika. I won't worry too much with the family stuff. That's Liam, but that's in Kuala Lumpur. Those are the Petronas Towers. I show in that city, and have since 1997 or 1998. It's the same dealer that's in Singapore as a gallery in Kuala Lumpur. Does anyone know where Kuala Lumpur is? Good. That's why I didn't know where it was either the first time I went there. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it's been a good market. Live by art. It's in a country called Malaysia. Back home, does anyone know where Toronto is? Back in Toronto, the same gallery that I'm with, General Hardware, is a good friend, Derek Peens. So I brought a few, as I said, sculpt works or images of friends as well. Don't worry, I'll get to my stuff and bore you soon. But and Derek, I love for the materiality of his work, and he pushes the limits of mediums and what we do with it, and I really think pushes things into tomorrow, like these pieces of art. Those wood sculptures too, like this. I love slides, I'll start a little faster. And another, this is an artist from Geneva, but he shows at the same gallery called Christian Gozenbach. He does really incredible things. This is, I believe he poured liquid aluminum, molten aluminum on pasta. And I guess as it hit the pasta, it would cool it and make it crystallize and form into these crazy shapes. He just got the biggest awarded the biggest prize in Geneva. I had €1 million to do a sculpture of Chevrolet. I guess Mr. Messias Chevrolet, I guess, came from Geneva, and he did a sculpture, an inverted sculpture. There's an inverted sculpture. I guess I'll show you. He also makes these skins, so he takes old televisions and things, and what's the term when you have an animal skin? He flays them to make them look like an animal skin, but they're just old Sony products. He makes these things out of concrete too, but I want to get to this. This is one of the inverted sculptures that he does, inside out kind of sculpture, and that's in aluminum. He's really, all his family is scientists except for him, but you can see it in his work that he's really a scientist as well. But enough of those guys, let's get on to me. So, just starting kind of a bit chronologically, but kind of, I'll go off the track a bit, but this show was really the first, after moving back from Santa Fe, from being an illustrator, this was the first kind of solo show I did as a qualified painter. It was called Effect because I just had my first child, and it was basically about the effect of how it affects one. And there was a great big painting that's it copy from the catalog, but a painting it was called Affection. It was an 8-foot by 8-foot painting, because I thought that, you bring a child into life, really the only thing they need is affection, and lots of it. But this is when I also started incorporating text and pouring, and the use of some imagery. And I take words and take them out of context, and these are not on plexiglass, these are on panel, but and just play with words that had mundane, maybe meanings if it was just written on a page, but give it its 12 or 15 minutes of Andy Warhol fame by putting out a big painting for no particular reason. And I also used a lot of collage back in the day, so I'm going to run you through older work and then we'll get to the good stuff. But a lot of collage, and a lot of, again, by this point I wasn't working with plexiglass, but I was diffusing, I was pouring, I was using acrylic paint, but buying it in its pure form with no pigment, and then adding pigment so that it would, I could control the amount of opacity. So then I would put collage down, and I did a lot of beach series, and then pour the stuff over top. And capillaries, just typical stuff. And I'd find old signage. That was the thing I did a lot too. That was where, like, say, imagery, I'd find things and I'd incorporate them into an old bankrupt sign. But to me, I saw it on the street, it's 10 feet long, but I had to take the old sign home and make it mine. Cover most of it up, but that's kind of what I was doing at the time. And then it dawned on me that maybe I should have some content in the work, and I started to wonder what was really affecting me in my life. And I realized that the neighborhood and the idea of a home was really troubling me, because the gentrification that was happening in the neighborhood I lived in was disturbing me. It was all artist studios and warehouses, and it was being turned into lofts and little tiny lofts, not beautiful places, but little 400 square foot or 300 square foot little homes, and people with little dogs and stuff. And I started to act in against it. So the first project I did was I found a phone booth, just happened to find one, and I turned it into a living space. I call it the micro loft. And it had hardwood flooring and leather seating, and it has a television on the top, and it has all the accoutrements of any little loft. But it was also portable. So then I did a series called Nobody's Home, and I dragged or I had people drag it around for me, to different locations to make fun. At the time there was a baseball strike or a hockey strike, there must have been a baseball strike on, so it was really important to me to get this stadium and drag it to the stadium and get a shot of a businessman type person. That's actually me, with this portable home. And then we touched on industry as well, or I did. This is after the painting by the American artist, which I will not remember right now. We'll go back to that. And it took this place, this micro loft everywhere. But really, it was a tongue-in-cheek, having taken the piss out of the whole idea of these developers, and to me, kind of destroying the neighborhood I was in. And inside the micro loft, there was, as you can see, there's a fireplace and a kitchen, and in the ceiling, in the roof of it, there was a TV monitor. And I thought I had a slide of it, but maybe not. I created a short film of this woman who gets a makeup job. It's a makeover gone wrong, and by the end of the makeup job, you can't even see her face. And it was basically, again, another metaphor for what was happening to the neighborhood. So that went over well, that piece. So I did a second piece, or I did this other. I went away to an artist residency in a remote part of Canada, the east coast of Newfoundland, as they say. And it struck me again how beautiful was there with these dilapidated houses and these poor people and the lifestyle they had. and how awkward it was back home with these little tiny condos that are going everywhere, and these people that weren't happy and angry with the confusion of a big city. So I did a piece called Shantytown. It was an installation with a bunch of little houses, and I made a short film on 16mm film, and I made big scene prints and like bus shelter kind of ads. And again, it was just making fun of, this one kind of sums it up, of all the developers in their signage like this. It's always 80% sold. As soon as the showroom opens, it's 80% sold. Right? And it was fun to play with this kind of to really learn to have a voice is what I'm trying to get through. With it. I wasn't just making pretty pictures. I was trying to do something that also had a point. Because before that, I was just making pretty pictures. And then it dawned on me this whole idea of light. Starting, it was filtering in my mind all this time, light and how important light was to me. And then having come from the advertising world, I started to play with light boxes and make these imagery. We have Jeff Wall. Does anyone know Jeff Wall? Canadian artist. We have Morgan. Says yes. Anybody else? Is that one in the back? Okay. Well, you should know who Jeff Wall is. Anyways, the backlit artist that he's photo-based and cinematic in nature. But in Canada, as soon as you start to play with a light box, everybody points the finger at you. But anyways, I took it my own way, and I was trying to really downplay or again have fun with the idea of advertising and putting imagery in that was not your typical billboard. And this is then what the Miami Basil art there was. And then I started to make these. Now I'm working with plexiglass and the light and the idea, and I started to make these wall pieces basically, which would they would come out from the wall, they would interrupt the space, and there would be light inside them, but there would be paint on either side, and sometimes things hanging inside them. There was a few of them. This one's called Harder Please. That's 10 feet tall, but I think it comes out 4 feet. So they're quite big pieces. But I was pouring acrylic onto the plexiglass, which isn't an easy thing to do, to make it stick. But you have to know what you're doing. But sorry, question? No? Oh, jeez. I heard a question.
So where is that piece?
Where is that piece right now? Good question. It didn't sell. In storage. There's a good friend, David Bolduc, he passed away about 4 years ago. He was quite a well-known Canadian artist. He told me once, his words of wisdom were, as a Canadian artist, if you want to make big pieces, have big storage. This is another piece, though. I like working with neon. I've done a lot of pieces with neon. This is more current piece. This is 4 years ago. A client who had an outdoor space. This faces the water, and they wanted to be able to hang outside. So I thought I should make a nautical piece, but then I thought I should use a spoonerism, if anybody knows what that is, and play with the word and make it a naughty piece, a naughty cow. And I tried to make it look like it was on water or something that's wrong. That's more true to the work that I do now. And then going back to the gentrification and the idea of home, I did a piece, I did an ice house. This is just a little ad for it. This was a poster for it. It was a piece, it was 2 pieces of art. It was a house made of ice and a wooden deck. And it was also a performance. This is the ice house. What I did was I went out and I hired these figure skaters, and I brought along a cinematographer, and we shot the figure skaters elsewhere, and made this film of them, and projected it onto the ice house. And the ice house has the word trust, I don't know if you can see it there. And the idea was, and then there's we'll go back again, then there's the wooden deck which sat beside the ice house. And the whole idea was the whole piece was about trust, and it was about the figure skaters were the metaphorical imagery for the trust, because they were they're doing things called the skin of death and things, of these moves that they do. And then the ice house was there to represent the idea that trust could slowly, it could last forever, or it could just slowly melt or deteriorate. And the wooden deck was there because it invited the people that came out that night to smash the hell out of it, with the idea that trust could also be lost in a second. And that's what the night was about. And it was a very good night. And there's really good imagery of the skaters and the way it projected onto the ice, and the ice changed as it melted. It was a temporal piece. It's only lasted a day, the ice, even though the walls were very thick. But you got really beautiful results. And it changed constantly as the 24 hours or 30 hours that it took to melt as it went by. And then I was invited to, we do this thing called, Toronto has this event called Nuit Blanche. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Okay. And Nuit Blanche is an all-night citywide art party. They get about, average 1 million people that come out every night to the streets, and it goes all night. They invite artists, they invite artists, international acclaim, local artists. And somebody saw this piece and invited me to do it on the street for a Nuit Blanche, and I basically repeated it, but I went and I filmed an demolition derby. We know what that is, right? And then spliced the film into 3, and then projected it. And the ice house at this time was built on a street, in the middle of a street at night. And it was projected on 3 sides so that it looked like the cars were driving and smashing into each other all around the ice house. And the deck was awkward, and it had no vantage point. You couldn't access the deck. And then it was destroyed. Everybody had to sign a waiver if they wanted to swing any sledgehammer. And we made a film of it too, which I think is still on YouTube. And if you sign the waiver and swung the sledgehammer, you get to be part of the film. And that's follow me. So then a fourth piece I did based on this whole idea again we'll get to some paintings soon, don't worry. The idea of home and gentrification was a film called Crandall's Collision. Across from where my house is was an auto body shop called Crandall's Collision. And it had been bought by developers. It was being torn down to be a condo building. And so I wrote this script for a film, which basically was verbatim that. Then it became fiction. It left that and became its own thing. And we shot this film, and we shot, it's called, I call it a short film that probably should have been a feature, because we shot so much. But it was well received. It was, we have Showcase. We have Showtime, I think, here. We have Showcase back home. It was optioned by Showcase. It was a beautiful setting, the place itself. And it was just eye candy. And we had really good actors in it. Richard Clarkin, and Canadian actors, you wouldn't know them probably. And again, I had this ability. To me, I had everything I wanted in my hands. I could talk about these things that were bothering me, and I could talk about it in different mediums. It was really enjoyable to do that. To me, that's sculpture, that way. I'm composing something out of nothing, and it becomes a physical thing. So enough of the home. So then, a show. I had done a few shows by this point in Singapore, but I'm not showing everything I've done. I'm just kind of breaking down and taking steps so you can see, I guess, a quick evolution of who I am. But I did a show called Frolic, and this now I was taking the pouring of acrylics a bit further, and imagery and collage, but with Frolic, what I did was I created basically because I'd made a few short films now, for my inspiration, I created a mock script, and then I made paintings around the script. It was almost like being the illustrator again, but for myself. And it was the story of this character and whatever, and this woman he finds, and so on and so forth. But again, I guess what I want to do, and when I do peek at my notes, I notice I kept underlining inspiration, 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 because inspiration to me can be the most difficult thing for an artist, and you have to be inspired, and inspiration is everywhere. But you have to just know how to inspire yourself, right? You have to keep the engine going. But by now I was working on plexiglass pretty much 100% because I loved it so much. And it's still pouring. The last few years I don't pour anymore. And then, again, keeping the whole inspiration thing going, I had a horrible eye accident. I almost lost my left eye. And at the time, before I regained sight, all I could see was little bits of color and light out of my one eye, and it was like scratches and dots. So it became this whole body of work, which was at the gallery in KL now. This is Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, right near Singapore, south of Thailand, east of India. And it's a beautiful setting, the gallery in Singapore. It's kind of in a residential area, but it's a big sprawling house that's been turned into a gallery. And so, these are kind of up close now. But the idea of these paintings, I just wonder what was a close-up one. This is when the power tool started, and I was ripping and tearing the wood. It was almost like the aggression of what happened to me. I was putting back into the art. I was using it, tools and anger and aggression and ripping and tearing things. And I think the next slide you can see, well, you can just see how it starts to get out into the wood. Here's a good one. Or even this one. You can see I was just ripping. So these are on panel, not plexi, but I was ripping down through layers of wood and tearing it apart and then applying paint afterwards. And it was, again, to me, it was, I guess it was just what I had to do. But it was almost like therapy. But it came out of the accident, the horrible traumatic thing that happened to me. And it evolved into something that I could sell at a gallery. But the drawing has always been there too. These are still from that whole scratches and dots. That's a pipe. This one's called Heat-Seeking Missile of Love. And that's one of the bigger ones, that's 12 feet, I think. That was fun to ship to Singapore. That was fun to ship to Singapore too. But these are all still from that same kind of scratches and dots and ripping and tearing. And there was a lot of these squish circle kind of things, which were kind of, playing with the idea of damaged eye and these powers, there's just a lot of things going on, but at the same time I was trying to just hone it all in as to what my practice was and where I was going. The next slide is not from Scratches and Dots. It's called Two Blue Skidoos. Do you have skidoos? So I thought I wanted to make a Canadian piece. I made it kind of crazy abstract ground and put the skidoos going over top. So that's slightly out of order. This piece and the next couple were still from Scratches and Dots. So I'd also been hanging around LA with writing scripts with this one friend, and so this was called Sunset Strip, but again, it's an angry sunset strip, ripped and torn, and sunset strips in Los Angeles. This one's called Remain Calm and Carry On. I think we're, this is still Scratches and Dots. This is half plexi and half wood panel. No questions? Okay. I think we're going to exit Scratches and Dots pretty soon. Catalog, gallery, it's another one, So then, this says 2009 again, but it wasn't, I think the last one said 2009, but anyways, they're separated by a few different years. But this is another show in Singapore. I actually did a show called Beauty Queens and Cowboys, which I haven't really documented here, but and it was a show for KL, two galleries, Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. But there was demand, so I created a bunch of other work for the gallery in Singapore on paper, and we call it And Other Related Stories. So these are just, big works on paper with a lot of collage and just energy. So again, my medium's been ice, film, wood, paper, polycarbonate. I pretty much work on anything I can get my hands on, especially if it's free. So these are all like 5-foot sheets of paper. That's 5 feet. This is one studio I had, and it was real sweet because I could work outside too. It's where I did all my spray painting. So that's what Toronto was like. And this is a very good friend of mine, Matthew Carver, and my 2 kids in Venice a few years back. Matthew's in the Saatchi collection. We know who Charles Saatchi is. Oops. Yeah, he strangles them. So they've got problems. This is my son Liam in Greece at the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Again, throwing these in only because all this travel and everything is always inspirational for me. I've just started with another gallery in Calgary, which is Alberta, which is our oil producing part of the world. And this is Banff. So I was out a few years back. I just started with one gallery, but a few years ago I was with a different gallery there, and I was out for a show. And I just threw these in to show you how beautiful Lake Louise is. It's a really special part of the world. And this is some of the work I did. So, for that show, and at the time, my mother was really sick in the hospital. Well, she died eventually, shortly after, but it looked like she was going to die as I was preparing for the show. And the work came out like this with, I photographed some flowers that were in her room, and then I kind of just digitized them and using dark colors for the most part, painted them on these irregular sculptural dimensional surfaces. They were kind of somber pieces, but it was what was happening in my life, and it reflected it. That's a sweet little one. Very fuzzy. Sorry? A little bit, that one is fuzzy. That's the main. But again, I've always been, I've always liked irregular shape. I've always liked different levels of information. And I've always liked ripping the crap out of things. Power tools. And that piece is that we just saw. That was in place. That's fuzzy too. This one's called I Don't Know. I want to go somewhere, I just don't know where. And these are all on wood. Some wood found, some wood created, like surfaces I might have created myself. Some I might have ripped off a neighbor's fence or something. I think in this case. Again, I threw a lot of these more dimensional pieces in just because, again, it's sculptural pull. But these, this next one was a good one. This is quite a big piece. And I was invited about 3 years ago, well, whenever the whole Occupy thing was happening, there was a show in Toronto called 60 Painters, and it was kind of like a survey of, I guess, Toronto or Canadian painters, and I was invited to be part of it. And I didn't do a typical painting like I was doing at the time. On the side, I was making these kind of crazy things. So I did this piece, which was called Occupy, and I had taken a new studio, and everything in it was found in the studio, including the Government of Canada sign, the fruit stuff. So I call it studio debris. I just made everything out of, made the whole piece out of studio debris. But it was tongue-in-cheek again about the whole, funded by the Government of Canada, the whole Occupy thing, because it happened in Toronto as well. And it was easy picking, I thought, to make fun of. I'm not saying I don't believe in the whole thing. I didn't believe in the way the government supported it, though. The government's almost like they're pot calling kettle black sort of thing. This is the studio I'm in now. me preparing for sucker punch. That's a view of the studio from the loading bay. Some more shots of the studio. I like to just show how I keep a clean studio. I think it's very important to have good studio practice.
So are you working on all of those at one time, or are you working on each one and finishing it and moving on to the next one?
No, I'm playing around. When I get bored with one, which happens quickly, I move to the next. OCD. ADD, HD, TV.
That's the one.
This is,
That's the reason, right?
yeah, these, oh, okay, that's called the one on the beach.
Yeah, they had pencil over top and you written off, you cross
This is
them.
blurry in here. Oh, yeah, I drew on the walls. Well, there's close-ups of my walls, because the walls are just covered in drawing. More just shots, hardly. This is a, now, like I said, we're not really going in a linear kind of way here. I'm stepping back a bit again, but at one point I wanted to bring imagery into my, we saw it with the flowers and a few of the pieces, but I wanted to bring more imagery in. So I started to play with one Canadian of the moose, right? You know what a moose is? And then beach bunnies. So again, these are, like this one is a fairly big canvas again. So I would just create an abstract ground and then project these images on them. The whole series I did that I mentioned, Beauty Queens and Cowboys, the Beauty Queens came from, I was renovating, I got a studio, I was renovating, I was ripping some walls down, and I found an old poster in the wall. And it was from the 70s, and it was a Miss Polonia beauty contest. And these poor women had these little tiny photos like this, you know, it was there, and you could see them all really wanted to be, you know, it was a high time in their life to be part of this beauty contest. So I thought I'd blow them up and make big paintings. But then I thought, well, that'd be too easy. I better take away a bit of their personality by digitizing it. So I made great big paintings of these beauty queens, which not unlike these beach bunnies. And they were just dot pattern with no personality, but giving them or trying to give them their 15 minutes of fame. And then I showed them in Singapore and it didn't make any sense. It was such a wrong show. This is the beach in Greece, one of my favorite beaches. That's kind of like the white tiger, I guess, I don't know why that's Mika and Harley again. Me throwing axes. Because that's what we do in Canada. When we're not skating on the canal, we're throwing axes. The longest skating rink in the world. Who cares? Again, in the vein of inspiration, and coupled with the idea of trying to make sales, one of the scripts I had that I was writing for a film that never got made, there was 96 pages in it of the script, so I did a show in my studio. I took each page of the script, collaged it down onto a piece of paper, and made a little quick painting on each one. I did 96 of them. Again, I was trying to push the idea of the film, but I was also just trying to make it a coin. It was fun. Again, just, you know, I'm trying to motivate myself. I'm trying to do things all the time. Just different material shots. And, you know, it occurred to me that I like stuff, you know, I like things like phone booths and things. And I realized that I always have a big garbage collection in my studio too, because I like so much stuff. But it's good to have stuff, I think, garbage stuff. And I will, again, show more paintings, current paintings, but this, I do teach one class that I was taking working. A lot of these were taken with my iPhone, so that's probably why they're blurry, these ones. But in the class, it's an abstract painting class, and I treat it as abstractly as possible. And instead of setting up a still life, I create these kind of things. This is one of the class, and then I tell them not to paint it. I tell them to paint about it, or paint around it, or paint, you know. But I've created so many of these things. They're really just junk piles, but somehow it motivates us to do it. It's an easy way. But some of them are cool. And better yeah, some of the results I get from the students is really good. They buy into it, they buy in the same. That one took a long time.
Hockey.
Yeah. And this one took a long time to set up. Laughter. So now, looking at the 42-minute clock. So again, I'm going to keep harping on the whole observation. So I had this horrible eye accident, and then a couple years later, I got a corneal transplant. So I could see it in my eye again. Don't even Google corneal transplant. If you see this stuff, it's horrible. But so it made me think I got an extra part in my body. I got something else. I got something I wasn't born with. So it became the title of this show. And then these graphic shapes started to float around on top of these abstract graphs. Now there's always been layering of information, but they became tighter and more, these actual little objects floating around. And again, it was kind of, to me, I had something floating around my body that was part of somebody else's, so it was unique, it was weird, it was horrible. But I could see again, though. She still had to die for me. And so those were canvas, the two others. I don't like canvas, I don't use it often. The bottom of that painting doesn't look very square, does it? These are on wood panel. Again, the gouging, except on canvas, is always part of my practice. It's not very good to use power tools on canvas, but so the shapes, the graphic shapes, the gouging, they all became, all of a sudden I was like, I was developing, or at least in my own mind, a vocabulary that was me, right? And then I could play with it. It could be wood panel. It wasn't going to be foam booths anymore. It could be wood panel. It could be canvas. It could be plexiglass. And I could talk about things. And I could. I was understanding my own voice. I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then came along this show. Again, with the different galleries, you get your slots of time when when shows are coming up. So I had a show coming up in Singapore, and I needed to do something. What am I going to do? Well, I was listening to a lot of the radio and hearing about this whole idea of the shift of power, world power, from the Americas, us, we're part of the Americas, to the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. And I thought, well, geez, wouldn't that be interesting to kind of play on that again? She kind of voice. So this is when I started using a lot of the spray foam, and more, my paintings were becoming more voluminous, I guess, or is it voluptuous? Which one is it? And this one's called White House. So what I'll do actually is I'll go, one of the very first ones I did, and I honestly wasn't setting out to do an American flag. But before the color went down, the shape and the proportion that I started to look at it, I thought, so if you can imagine with no blue or red or white, I just thought, this is looking like a flag. And then I thought, it's looking like an imploded American flag. And that was the genesis then for the body of work, which became, this one was the White House. It was supposed to be like the White House, exploding or just imploding or I'm not sure what this one's called, but something. This one was called the Cheddar Cheese Salvation, and it was about in the 80s when Ronald Reagan tried to help the inner city of New York. It was like but what we found out afterwards, he unloaded tractor-trailer loads of cheese in these neighborhoods in New York trying to win favors. But we realized, we found out later that afterwards that there was some surplus of cheese. It was just something that fell into his lap, and then he thought, oh geez, this will get me some credit. I'll hand it out to the people. I'll look good in the papers. But it was just some big surplus of cheese or some bullshit story that they had, and he turned it into I guess I think it all backfired. Do you remember that one? So I call this piece the Cheddar Cheese Salvation. This one's called the Yellow Rose of Texas. The one I liked the most was this one. It's called Stealth. It was supposed to be like a stealth bomber that hit the ground again. With its entrails coming out. dimensional, there's many layers happening, and then I started to work with these, playing with the, trompe-l'oeil of what is dimensional and what isn't in the piece. And that's another thing that I held on to and kept. And I noticed that Morgan used this piece in the promotional poster they have around. This was, it's called First Nations, and it was about some native strife that was happening back home. Just whatever was in the news about, Oka or whatever, I don't know what the situation was. It just made me, led to this piece, which doesn't feel that native, but this one's called N. Actually, I don't know what it's called. Same from the same show, though. Tales of Tomorrow. The flag. Now we're moving on to some works on paper. So when I showed you the big pieces on paper, but often when I work on paper, I just rip and tear it and put it back together with staples and tape and stuff. I'm just realizing why these never sell. Oh, shit. And then, so everything was kind of coming together as far as materiality, as far as the dimension, as far as the graphic devices on top of other painted surfaces and the whole translucency. And then I had this brainwave of a show called Thinking of Bush. And I wasn't thinking of George Bush. I wasn't thinking anatomically. I was thinking of, there's a Canadian artist, deceased now, called Jack Bush. And I'm sure nobody knows him. But he is quite a famous Canadian artist. And I was reading about his life, and I was recognizing how many similarities we had. So I did a show with Bush, and there's two pieces that were on vinyl, but the rest of them are on the polycarbonate. This one's on vinyl. I like this piece. I sold it in a second, and I sold it for a lot of money. And it was a whole vinyl sign. And all I did really was rip the imagery off of it, because it was sort of a furniture store or something. It's 7 feet by 7 feet. Just peeled the kind of vinyl plastic off it. Took out a little varnish and put a little device here. And people went nuts over it. So I'm going to do more of that. Whole vinyl signs. The piece, and it works like this piece. And again, this is now, as far as I'm concerned, more, it's me coming into my own skin, I guess. It works like this. This one, a lot of them are really, let a lot of the translucency live. And there's a lot of empty spaces. You can see the aluminum bars, and again, trying to suggest form that isn't there, and let the form that is there almost confuse the eye. This one's called Split Bush. And then you can see the drawing on the wall, not that I typically do. This one's called Double Bush. True. This one's called Bush Pilot. Every time the word bush in it, just for fun. This one's called White Bush. This wasn't part of that show. It doesn't have a bush in it. It's called White Heat. There's me pouring paint. There's me using a paintbrush. It's me using a paintbrush again. Notice the similarity in the colors of the canvas and the color of my hair. So then, quite recently, Sucker Punch, where Morgan saw some. Well, no, you didn't see this before. Yeah, before Sucker Punch, there was another Canadian artist showing the gallery, and Mike Weiss has a project with me called it, and he asked me to put work up for that, and that's where Morgan's on it. But Sucker Punch was basically, the title was me thinking that I could sucker punch the New York art scene, because they didn't see me coming, sort of thing. I'm not so sure that happened, but Yeah, the work, I really enjoyed this body of work. This is the gallery, 24th, across from Mary Boone. Have you heard of Mary Boone? So this is what I do. I make paintings. And this is one of the dimensional ones from the side. As you can see, there's about 6 cans of spray foam in that. And old signage I found, or stole. And these ones were called, the last one, and this one, and this one, and I'll show you a few others, were called The Flood. And when I first met Mike Weiss, the year before, whenever they had the big flood, Katrina, was it, or, yeah, in New York, he was telling me how deep the water was in his gallery, you know, in Chelsea. And right away my mind started thinking, like, well, that water receded. What about like sewer grates and that? What was it? It must have been full of crap. Was everything just, as the water went back and it drew over? So these were kind of like me thinking, you know, of this crap that would have been left in the sewer grates. This is the side profile. This is me drawing on the wall that Morgan saw. Careful with that ladder. This one's called The Godfather of Soul, what was it? James Dean. James Brown. This one's called James Brown. This one's called James Brown. This was at the Sucker Punch show. I don't think James Brown was, but this one was. This is a close up of another one of the flood ones. This is the flood bracket silver. A little close up of it. A blurry close up. And a blurry full shot. This was from the same show. And I used that signage that I found again, and I crossed out the kilometer. This is called 1 kilometer bracket 1 mile. And it was just, again, referencing, you know, in my mind, in the back of my head, that I was getting closer to the whole scene, you know, the New York scene. But also coming from Canada, it was a kilometer versus mile. Silver fold, Notorious. Again, all these are all polycarbonate, and you can tell on that blurry photo that all the gouging and distressing that I do to the plexiglass, that we can really be nasty to polycarbonate. It can take it. Much better than plexiglass. This one's called Crossfire. This whole body of work was, I would say, was kind of like wanting to take the cartoon world and film noir and mesh them together. So with the kind of gray, atmospheric kind of tones, and then the funky bright colors on top. This one's called Wilma. Can you see Wilma?
Is there a Fred?
No. Fred's coming. I mean, he's on the way. I'll show you what this one's called. This one's called, Saturday Night Special. Kind of more aggressive. This one's called Green Fold. Do you know why it's called Green Fold, anybody? Because there's a green thing folding over. So these shapes, again, the graphic shapes, and this trying to play with dimension and where not dementia, but dimension, and where the edge is, where the edge isn't, and where, play with the eye. This one's called Tumble. Is anybody having fun? Anybody? Raise your hands. This one's called The Big Ending. I'm not going to tell you why. one's called Face the Facade. And I was actually having a little go at the other artist that was, you know, the artist when you were down there, like, when you saw my
I
work?
can't remember his name.
Thrush Holmes, flowers and everything. So I was kind of having a go at Thrush with this one. I did a flower painting, but in my way. These are all like 5 feet by 3.5 feet. Silver for Steve. I'm not sure. No, this one's called Three Dog Night. Maybe faster. Waves at Calamero. They look like waves, and I just named it after the favorite beach. Not the frozen one at the start of the slideshow. This one's called You Fucking Idiot. Anybody know why? Back to paper. I work a lot on paper, but I try to find things. This was I did a whole series of these that we sold. They were on automotive schematic drawings. When I shot the short film at Crane Collision earlier, there was this big book of schematic drawings that just wanted to be liberated from the shop. They wanted to come home with me, so I brought it home. And then I've been making these drawings on it forever. I did a whole series too. I found a whole bunch of ledger papers of my own from the past when I was an illustrator. All my monthlies, whatever, I did a whole series on those. I find that with paper, with any surface, it's got some character to start with, or you create that character before it adds up. It adds to the whole energy of the painting. This is just a shot, obviously, at the end of the opening. This is called Lester, and it's a painting in progress. And I had a birthday recently, and they had a surprise party for me, and Kim Kardashian showed up in the form of an ice sculpture. And it's a luge. Does anyone know what a luge is? You must. You go to the university. So you pour booze in the top, right? And you put your glass or your mouth down the bottom there. Approximately right under her butt. And then this I thought was interesting, an artist survival guide. Because I thought, what does it take? But you really should make good friends along the way. It's important. You gotta be creative. You don't have wealthy parents, make some good investments. You don't have a thick skin, stop now. Throw good parties, be kind, but also be rude. Be supportive and be selfish. And learn to cook. And then I thought I'd show some of my friends, because they're all pretty crazy. And I don't think anybody's ever heard of this guy. He was in the news in the spring. He went to visit the new museum, what do you call it, where the Kun show was. This is a Hispanic cantor. And he put his big X on the wall. I must have all seen that. It was on vial of blood. This is him in my opening before that, but then he went and did that. This man's a performance artist. He's been kicked out of any respectable museum around the world, or every respectable museum. But that's but he's actually a really soft soul. He doesn't look like it, but I just saw stuff on Facebook. He's over hanging out with Ai Weiwei, drawing blood. These are a couple other crazy artist friends, as they look.
Are they thinking?
We were, yes. Brad Harms and Steve. This guy, you might know Graham Gilmore. Does anyone know that name? He's got work in the permanent collection in MoMA and showing with Mary Boone. And he's a pretty big name in Canada. He just moved to Toronto recently, and we've become really good friends. He's a wonderful guy. Does these but poured enamels and that. So you may have seen it around. Another one of this guy. You can really see the gouging that in the plexi in this one, in the polycarbonate. This one's called Stockyard Rumble, because my studio's in the stockyards of Toronto. So that's what I do. One question. Please, I don't want to feel that. Yes?
I was kind of curious, you talked in the beginning about how much you draw and how that influences your larger pieces, but the newer work seems more organic and playful. Do you sketch for these pieces?
Still do, yeah. Totally. I'll do sketches. But I'm not here, I don't keep a sketchbook of that, because my sketch will be on the wall. Like for the shapes that are on here, I'll sketch them for sure. I scribble everything. I think that it's, well, especially if you're working on a 5-foot piece of polycarbonate and you've created a ground that you really like, and you know polycarbonate costs you $1,200. It's to just try something without sketching ahead or thinking, it's a little unnerving, So, once I'm on a roll making these, the stuff comes out pretty quick, but I better sketch everything, for sure. It doesn't look like it, but it's important, I think. Yes.
On those really big wooden panel pieces, how are you supporting hanging them?
Well, they're built with a panel support, so they have a back.
And big ones hang on top?
So you just gotta make sure that you're hanging off, like a gravity bear is into something good, That big one I said was called Lester. Back a few slides, what did you put on that? It's gotta be 12 feet across, and there's a big sheet of plexiglass, like one of my panels in there, and it's heavy as hell. It took 2 of us to hang on the wall. And it came back, I came in one day, it was laying flat, and nothing was broken, nothing, not a chip off the wood, not the plexi or anything. So it takes a licking and it keeps on ticking. But, it's, hanging is an interesting thing, right? Like, when you hang heavy art, you gotta know what you're doing. So it's interesting. Gravity bear, that's, you know what gravity bear is? No? Come on, more questions. Came all the way from Toronto. Hi.
You gave us an artist survival guide, but do you have a advice from an artist to another artist just to give us a heads up along the road?
Advice for you for along the road?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all good. That wasn't necessarily good. That's so good. Nice. Cook. Do you cook? Do you like food? Good enough for that.
No, it's like one of the last things.
Well, honestly, inspire yourself, right? Or else you're going to be bored at some point. You're going to wonder why you're doing it. And you got to endurance. Don't be an artist. Endurance. Thick skin. How many people have got a bad review before? Thick skin. They've got muscle. More than one. I got good ones too. Honestly, to make good friends and be supportive and be rude and kind of at the same time, I'm being funny but serious. That's why I took a lot of these clowns that I hang around with too, because who do you fall back on when you're having a bad day or a bad year? Decade. You gotta fall back on somebody. This Van Cantor is not always going to be there. So, does that answer it or no?
Yep.
You gotta want to do it too, right? You gotta really know that this is what you're good about. So it's too much hard work to not be all into it. You gotta be into it 1,000%. And that doesn't mean you should scare yourself and think that you can't do it. Everybody can do it. But it's a long road. That's all. It's a long road. And that's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It's good to have the time to be able to learn yourself. I'm always learning. I learned a bit once, but I'm always wanting to learn. We have to push ourselves, right? Again, that's the whole point. Nobody's going to push you. You have to push yourself. Nobody's going to make your ideas come to life for you. You have to do it. Nobody's going to offer you money just for your good looks. You should be doing it from still be in the same place, I'd probably be better off financially. If I stayed in the illustration, you mean, or? I don't know. I think the question was, where would I be if I hadn't started as an illustrator?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes, that'll beat me up sometimes, I thinking that one through. Because I wonder, did that hold me back? At the same time, I think it adds a little bit. On a good day, I beat myself up over that. On a bad day, I beat myself up over that. On a good day, I think it's part of the process. That's why I showed my children that. They're all part of what makes you you, and it gave me a lot, that industry. I don't know, it's a question, one can really answer, right? But, yeah.
Where do the titles come? Before, after, during? You start with an idea or something that you want to deal with, or is it sort of
Probably all the above.
yeah?
For the most part, I'd say 90, the higher percentage would be after the fact. Create a piece and then it tells you what it should be called, so to speak. But sometimes you go in with it, thinking of what a piece is going to be called, like that one self. I made that, I'm going to do stuff. Wow, really? Yeah. Whereas the flag, I think it's called Tales of Tomorrow, as per the show, as the show is. You go into it making that, I was like, what is this? This is a flag? What the hell? I want to do a painting of a flag? Who am I, Jasper Johns? We know Jasper Johns, right? Come on. Always the drum. Sorry.
What are some of the other things that influence and inspire you? You talked a lot about home and family and kind of current events, but is there anything else that just seems kind of out there for you that still influences your studio practice or what you're thinking about and pains you? And
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to cross-pollinate